We're going to use that for our minutes. I figured out that I can turn on live transcription for anybody that has any sort of hearing issues. You can read, or loud in the background, or if it's just nice. So our normal agenda starts with reports, but we wanted to kick our meeting off tonight with a quick discussion on the management team's position on the thin blue line masks that we saw covered in the Independent. We had our management team executive board had a really very good conversation on the power of symbols and what symbols mean, both to those, because they mean different things to different people, right? I don't know, Lana, feel free to jump in if you want to here. Anybody else in the executive board? And then also Lieutenant Marr, if you're welcome to jump in and comment, or if there's anything going on in PD that you guys are ahead of us, that'd be great. So I think reading the Independent article from early last month, we saw the thin blue line masks really talked about and kind of dissected, and I think it means, and I think as a management team who, our initial charge was to figure out community policing, and talking to a bunch of our neighbors, we heard very clearly that, while the masks may, or the masks, the symbol, let's just call it the symbol itself may mean something to our law enforcement, workers, they mean something very different to other people. And it seems like a symbol should be listened to what the largest population seems to say. So I think that it's our position as a management team and the executive board's management team that we want them to be taken off whatever is appropriate to wear, and really deep consideration gone into what is an appropriate symbol when working as a law enforcement professional, how to read to everyone else that you're here to protect and serve. But I will open the floor up to that. Anybody that wants to talk about their feelings.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Please do.
So I don't think there's really disagreement here from the police department. We have a uniform policy. Obviously, it didn't foresee a pandemic with masks. And it was something that we take responsibility for not jumping on more quickly. As soon as it was brought to our department's attention, Chief Dominguez acted very quickly and wrote a special order. She ordered uniform masks, and those will be distributed. And I believe it's inappropriate to wear anything of symbol that may be offensive toward the community, whatever that meaning may be. So our uniform policy has been amended, and it's something that is not going to be worn by officers while on duty.
Good. Lieutenant, that's really great to hear. And Tony, I didn't mean to cut you off, so go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm just saying good, because most of the people I talked with think that the blue line is just another word for the blue wall of silence. So we would prefer not to have that image on the officers who are supposedly working for us, trying to keep our community safe.
Steve?
I just think that was a terrible symbol. But I also think there are other things in the police department that are related that we ought to call out too. Whenever the police are referred to internally as warriors, I think that is almost exactly the same symbol as the thin blue line mask. And it's rough to police speech, but I think that we ought to go on the record as urging people in the police department to avoid that rhetoric, avoid that use of language for the same reason.
I think that's hard to do, Steve, given the militarization of the police in general by this country.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's why we should raise it, I think, because this whole idea of police being a paramilitary unit, I think, is where one of the areas where policing has gone wrong.
Steve, and thanks for bringing up other symbols, because it reminds me of and I guess, well, let me first say to Lieutenant and Chief Dominguez and everyone on PD, thanks for hearing us. I think that we have a long ways to go in figuring out how to really figure out how to be a partner in community policing, and how to make sure that we're, as residents and as neighbors, able to able to feel like we're safe, both from those who are here to protect us and from those who the police are. I don't know. I can't figure that. I can't finish that sentence without boxing myself into a place I don't want to be. But I think that what I'm trying to say is, like, we need to work together, and this is the beginning of that, right? And I'm happy to see that. The thing that Steve just reminds me of is the video that came out of last year's police academy recruits, which ended with like a bunch of bullets lined up in the Roman numerals of their class. And it was set to heavy metal music, and just, it was aggressive and angry. And I think one of those things that we need to take a look at the optics of the communications coming out of the police department and the police academy, because I think that it just sends a message that isn't friendly. It's, anytime that you have bullets writing numbers, it's not a good sign. But I see the mayor just unmuted himself, so.
Yeah, if I may.
I would say too that it's not only police messaging. I think if we look at our broader society, even Channel 8's Wednesday's Warriors, who are battling whatever we're all battling in COVID and whatever, it's how do we use language to express who we are, who we want to be, and how we can work together. And I think that's a good point that you made, Ian, is that community policing is about partnering. And it's about community partnering and about listening to members of our community and what their needs are. And they may vary across the city. They do vary across the city. But the police needs are important too, if they're going to get their protecting job done, in a partnership way. So I really believe that it's possible to partner. It's imperative to partner. And we can lead the way in New Haven because we have been a leader in so many ways in community policing, but we also have a society that we also need to change.
That's a good point. Mayor Elker?
I saw that video and had the same reaction that you were highlighting, Ian. And I think that it's not just a communications issue, but a reflection of the culture that may still be persistent, or in some ways is persistent. I think that often you can't compare New Haven with like a Minneapolis police department by any means, but it doesn't mean that there's not a lot more work that we need to do. I appreciate what the lieutenant said about the thin blue line and the masks. Officers are not allowed to wear as a part of their union a pin. They're supposed to cover up their tattoos. And the reason for that is we want the officers to arrive at a scene with the most likelihood for success. And if they're arriving at a scene and they may be not just offending someone, but making someone feel like they're not there to help, and that's going to be a problem. And so the standardized uniform is meant to serve that purpose, and making sure that we have a standardized mask is something that clearly needed to be done. And I'm glad that we've done that. I haven't had a ton of experience hearing officers refer to themselves as warriors. I think that's not productive. Would like to explore that more. But I do think, there's a lot of work that we've been doing to address issues around policing, not just on the accountability side, but on the idea that the goal is not policing, it is a safe community. Crisis response team that we're working on developing is, I think, a huge step in that direction. It's taking time because we want to make sure we do it right, to have individuals that are not police officers respond to some 911 calls. We're also looking into additional training on top of the de-escalation, anti-bias training that we already do, and and of course, open to more feedback and collaboration with the community on other ways that we can improve the services.
Thank you for that. Yeah, the announcement.
If I could just jump in also
Go
to
ahead.
Steve's point, I've talked about it several times in this meeting on the psychological way I kind of look at policing. And that's why I deployed bicycle officers in blue uniforms. The NYPD did a study of post 9/11 of why tourists were talking to police officers, and they found it was their light blue uniform that was friendly and approachable. So the NYPD changed their uniform to a dark blue uniform for their terror mitigation. I went the opposite way. I put my officers in light blue uniforms downtown to be more friendly and approachable, to that exact point to Steve. Like, we don't want the appearance of being like unapproachable and warriors. We want to be approachable because we are members of the community, and we want to be part of that and approachable so we can work with our community members. In addition to what we're trying to work on, I've spoken about this many times. I'm a firm believer in crime prevention through environmental design. The chief has sent me to a class. I was away for the past week down in South Carolina getting certified by the National Institute of Crime Prevention on ways we can change our environment, little things to make crime less likely to occur, so that there's not the need for as many police, the crime doesn't exist, and there's not that police community interaction that may be negative. So we are working on things behind the scenes to improve upon those things so that we can strategize better and have officers really targeting violent perpetrators in the community that need to be more addressed, rather than the quality of life stuff that, you know, can be dealt with by alternative measures.
Well, just to say it again, thank you for your leadership on that. Steve, is that a thing? Oh, you're on mute, Steve.
One final thing I wanted to say is that we had an incident on Academy Street about a week ago, and it was a man who seemed to be disturbed, a relatively young man who seemed to be disturbed, who I don't know exactly what the initial call was. I actually saw it on C-Click Fix. It boomed up in front of me, and then I look at the window, and there it was. And I just wanted to commend the officers. There were 4 of them, 2 on bikes and 2 in cars. And the way they dealt with this young man was fantastic. Just like, you know, being, you know, not raising voices, not touching him. They actually, and Emma Lowe, our neighbor, was actually watching from her window, and she's the street psychiatrist for the homeless. And people talk, we didn't know the guy. There was a discussion with the police about him. And I thought, this is an example of, on another day in another community, or even ours, under the wrong circumstances, this could have gone bad, because the guy was, very verbally abusive and very loud, and made threatening gestures. But ultimately, he was, AMR came and took care of him as a medical emergency. So I just felt like this is an example of how it's done. And unfortunately, I didn't get the names of the police officers, but Sean, you probably know who they are. But I told them, I said, thank you so much for your restraint. It's noted.
Thank you, Steve, for bringing that up. I think that raises the really excellent point, and especially in this meeting, where I think what we want to do is we want to bring forward the issues that we have, and then also bring forward the successes that we see. Right, let's figure out how to reward and how to uplift really good behavior, because that's the model that we need to set, and that's what we needed to see more of. So thanks for bringing that up, and thanks for saying that, Steve. All right, any other further questions or comments on this, and we'll move into our normal reports. Anything else? Going once? Going twice? All right, so here's the rundown of our reports tonight. I'll hand it back over to the Lieutenant for the report from the PD. We're going to hand it over to Steve for the report from the Civilian Review Board. We'll talk about, Carmen will talk about LCI. We will also take a moment in the LCI report to talk about 235 St. James Street.
St. John's.
St. John. Sorry. And then we'll hear from our alders, and then we'll go into our the rest of our agenda. So, Lieutenant.
I'd like to start the meeting. Unfortunately, last week was a really sad week for the New Haven Fire Department, and obviously we lost a member of our fire service. I'd just like to have a moment of silence for our firefighter that we lost. Thank you. Those of you who don't know, the funeral services will be on Thursday, so downtown will be a little congested with traffic. And I know we'll be getting things out to the community about some of the street closures that will be happening for that. So stay tuned for some of the details. Just some of the crime trends that have been going on over the past several weeks. We had a series of commercial and residential burglaries throughout the district, both downtown and in Worcester Square. Fortunately, last week, unfortunately, College Street Cycling was the victim of an attempted burglary, and that perpetrator then went over to Linwood Place. Officers were quickly able to respond with the assistance of the LPD, where we did make an on-site arrest. So it was the 4th on-site arrest downtown this year for burglaries, which is good. We have seen a little bit of an increase. However, hopefully this arrest minimizes those from continuing to occur. On a positive note, robberies, which were a problem last year, we spoke about several times, an increase of robberies. They are down across the board, both armed robberies and strong arm robberies. With the COVID restrictions releasing, we have bicycle beats on both A squad and B squad, which is our morning shift and evening shift. And I believe that's really helping us minimize these violent crimes from occurring. Positive note, distracted driving. We applied for a grant. I spoke about it in the last meeting. We did over 400 infractions citywide for distracted driving. Lieutenant Torquati from the detail room is now putting together a grant proposal for both speed and I believe click it or ticket that's coming up. So we'll have additional enforcement besides our normal motor vehicle with our regular patrol officers, as well as our traffic unit, specialized enforcement dedicated to making our roadways safer with some speed grants. Based on a lot of community complaints, we talked about this last year, the noise ordinance from downtown with loud motorcycles and cars disturbing outdoor dining and residents. We were out last Thursday. What I did was I came up with a nice sign, some imaging and signs on a sandwich board, and we had officers out there with a decibel reader. I was out there for 3 hours on Thursday night, and I had never heard College Street so quiet. Actually, there was only one person who violated the ordinance, which was good. And what I have is it's a public education flyer. That's a noise thermostat that shows like the decibel levels in which starts to damage the ear. So we're out there just trying to educate the motorcyclists and cars who are, potentially damaging their ears and giving them information how it is a residential neighborhood and there's many residents. We haven't been issuing infractions. There's been very limited actual stops because very few people, I think, when they see the signs are, revving their engines and keeping it loud. So we're having the driver behavioral changes that we want to see. And we're having positive, connections with the community. Hundreds of pedestrians are thanking us for being out there. They see the sign. And I think the sign is very important because not just the people that we're talking about. I'm sorry, my dog saw a squirrel in the backyard and she's barking a little bit. I apologize for that. So the noise ordinance, we're going to continue that during the bar detail times, restaurant times, and hopefully keep it a quiet place to be. We have Yale commencement coming up this weekend. It's Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So we're going to be out there making sure that there's intermittent closings of the roads, short periods of time. It's not a full commencement weekend like we've seen in the past, but we'll make sure that our roadways are safe. And that's all I have to report. If there's any questions, I'm here to answer them.
I got something for you, Sean.
Here, Tony.
The noise issue. Please try to do something on Water Street, especially under the underpass, under the highway, because that seems to be an echo chamber for these folks. And it's those cars with the glass pack mufflers and stuff, just jamming it and screeching, and a lot of motorcycles, and it's all right down here at the end of Chestnut Street. So I really would appreciate a presence down there. It's gotten very loud over the last 2 weeks.
Fortunately, Sergeant Marshall and Lieutenant Renkowitz, who handle our drag racing detail, they've been given signage as well, and they're going to be out there with the decibel meter while they're doing that enforcement. And I believe that many of those drag racing cars are probably the ones making the noise under that overpass, because one of their areas where they congregate is over on East Street. So hopefully their enforcement there can have an impact on that, and I can definitely add it to an area in which we can set up regular downtown officers to do some enforcement there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Well, Lieutenant, I'll pass along your the thing about the bar detail noseriness to Miriam. I know she's not with us tonight because of Shavuot, but I'll make sure that she knows. She'll be very appreciative. All right, next up, Steve with the report from the CRB.
Okay, the Civilian Review Board, we meet monthly. We've had a lot of the meetings so far have been really discussions of policies and procedures to make sure that people really understand what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it. And I think that's an ongoing process. But you know, we have the sources of information to straighten it out. So I think it is clarifying. So we haven't had any cases yet. We hear reports every month from Lieutenant Zanelli, who's the head of internal affairs. The cases they've closed, there's a summary of it and what action has been taken. And so far, none of them have kind of raised concerns to the level of people on the CRB saying, oh, we should investigate that one deeper. That hasn't happened yet. We also get stats on police activities that aren't necessarily part of the complaints. And I want to tell you, it's important to tell you that the number of kind of fights between police and civilians has been up in recent months. And also the numbers of times when police officers have drawn their service weapons have been up. You know, this is when I think 2 months ago at the meeting, we asked Zanelli about this, and he said that there's, in the past year or so, there's been more resistance to instructions from police officers. And that more, you know, and therefore when an arrest is being made, more scuffling. As far as drawing the weapons, he was not, that really was something that became aware of at the last meeting, and he was not there because I think his whole family has COVID, and he's caring for them. So he was not at that. Hopefully they don't have it anymore. But anyway, so this is something to watch, because, you know, the drawing of the weapon is the first thing you do is you draw the weapon, and then the next thing you might do is shoot it. So we haven't had any incidents like that, but it seems like this is something that all of us citizens and civilians should be aware of, and the mayor should be aware of, and the police. And Sean, you know, you guys, it's just an issue that has to be watched, and hopefully everybody is paying real close attention. So I'm on two subcommittees, training subcommittee and the MOU subcommittees. MOUs, memorandums of understanding with the other police departments in the city, the University Police Departments. And we haven't really gotten very deep in either of these, but we had some training as part of our getting going with the CRB. And there was a feeling after we had that training that we didn't have enough training on de-escalation and anti-bias. We want to understand how the police are trained in these things. And we also want to hear from outside people about what's the standard practice, what should be the training. So if there's a gap between what, you know, outside experts think should be done and what is being done, we think that's something that we should pay attention to. So, and that is all of my report. If anybody has questions, you can ask me, or you can send me an email, steveham31@gmail.com, and I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah, this is Anstress. I have just one thought about what's been reported about people drawing weapons more, police drawing weapons more. Maybe you could ask um, the department to look at who is involved. So for instance, if you find that it's pretty much spread over the whole continuum from new officers to experienced officers, you'd interpret that data one way. You know, it's a change in environment or thinking. If let's say you find it's mostly young officers or officers that went through the academy at a certain time,
Mhm.
that would be interesting to know too.
Yes.
But I think that it could be the kind of thing, you know, often when people are sworn in for their shift, their advice is given, you know, or a review of general orders. And it could be that this would be something to really look at to try to nip in the bud, to analyze it and then address it as soon as possible in a discussion with the officers before they go out for their shift. And then to maybe ask them, do people
Yeah.
feel that they want some supplemental training on this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Something like that.
I think that's a good thing. And I think we should actually raise this at the next ComStat meeting. I think that's really the best place for it.
Just to give some information on how we data collect this, every time an officer uses force outside of like unfight, like if someone doesn't fight to be handcuffed, it requires a use of force form. And up all the way up till drawing the firearm and obviously any force past that. So internal affairs, it has to be reviewed by the street sergeant. It goes to internal affairs, and internal affairs detectives watch the video of every single use of force, and they're analyzed for what they're doing right and wrong, and retraining is part of it. So we track every officer, every incident. So when there's trends, potential trends, and I don't want to speak for internal affairs because that's Lieutenant Zanelli's expertise, giving more information, but it's not something that just gets thrown in a pile. Like there's Excel sheets and data collection, and it's taken very seriously because we are forward thinking on making sure that those incidents, if we identify officers having problems, that they are properly dealt with either by corrective action, retraining, and or discipline.
Steve, this is Abby. I don't think I have a raised hand function. I actually just have one quick question. First of all, thank you for your update and for serving. When you talked about the MOU committee, what is the scope of that committee? I'm curious what that committee is looking at.
We're looking at the MOUs and I can't remember exactly how this came up. I mean, it wasn't something that I raised, but I think member Rick Krause was the one, you know, because he just came out of Yale. He's very much kind of the bridge between the university and the community. I think that was just the sense that we want to be aware of these and what's in them. Because, you know, just on the policy level, and also, obviously, we had that terrible incident 2 years ago where the Hampton officer and the Yale police officer both fired their weapons in a way that you could describe as reckless, at least. And so there's a desire to be aware of them. I don't know if if the CRB has any jurisdiction over those. Maybe you can tell me. But there was just an interest, and you know, because people in the community raised this, you know. So I think you want to know. I think that's the basis. We just want to understand it. And they asked for the Yale. Al Lucas asked for the Yale MOU, and the initial response he got was no. I don't know who was. I think it was like the corporation council or something like that. And the answer was, it's in negotiation. So we'll give it to you when we have a new one, kind of thing. So, you know, which obviously we don't like hearing things like that. So I don't know how that's going to be resolved.
Can I respond here?
Yeah.
So no one should be saying no about a public document. Steve, if you can email me at jelliker@newhavenct.gov, we'll get you the MOU. That's not appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, so I don't think the CRB has any jurisdiction over either agreement. We have an MOU with the university, and we also have an MOU with Hamden, and they're both quite old and need to be updated.
Mhm.
We've spent internally some time reviewing the Hamden MOU, and frankly, we've just been distracted by a million other things that we need to make more progress on both of those. But it would be great to get the CRB's input and thoughts on how they should be amended. Even though, like, legally, there's my understanding is there's no jurisdiction. It doesn't make,
Mhm.
in the grand scheme of things, it's about getting the right agreement
Mhm.
right. We're very open to collaborate on that.
Good.
And just one other thought on the stats, and I'll check in with Lieutenant Zanelli, but I think it's I don't know exactly what was presented to you as far as the use of force incidents going up. We do typically get a lot more incidents over the summer. And so it's possible that that's one of the driving factors, but we should look at this as a kind of longer term uh, look at the numbers of the longer term to see if it's an anomaly, if there's some trend that we should be concerned about. But I've flagged it and I'll look into it.
Yeah, I believe it was the first 3 months of the year compared to the first 3 months of last year.
That's
That's what
helpful
we
to
saw.
know.
Yeah.
That's helpful to know.
Steve, just to that point, what the chief has me doing, I'm a bit of a data collector. I've been analyzing data for certain hotspot locations where we've seen use of force on a
Mhm.
3-year trend. Every instance we use force and what were the circumstances for that. So it is something that the chief's office is looking into to see how we can amend things that we're doing to make sure that we're acting appropriately.
Mhm. Okay.
Anything else?
Nope.
Great. I'm just following up quickly on that last discussion between the MOU between Yale and NHPD and the city. Is I think when that does come up, it would be really great to get a report in this meeting about that, because downtown is, slap down right in the middle of that, and a lot of people that are interested in that. So it'd be really great to be able to talk about that whenever that's appropriate. And I'll reach out to you as well, Mr. Mayor. All right, seeing nothing else on the CRB, and thank you very much, Steve, for that report. We'll move to LCI. Carmen.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I have a really nice report set for you guys, but I must yield 5 minutes to my coworker, Kathy Schroeder, who has an exciting program, the Castle program, and she's going to be talking to you about it. So, Kathy.
Thanks, Carmen. Thank you for letting me squeeze in your time slot. I'm Kathy Schroeder, Deputy Director of LCI. The City of New Haven launched a program born out of the COVID-19 pandemic called the Castle Program. It's offered to tenants and homeowners, and it can be accessed through their landlord as well. It's up to $8,000 for rent arrearage or mortgage arrearage. If you've been COVID impacted, you've had an income disruption due to COVID-19. I could go through, it's about $8,000, up to $8,000 for both. If you're a homeowner, it's up to $8,000 for your mortgage, up to $8,000 for your rent. And it's from March of 2020 forward, which is now back, right? So from March of 2020 to date. The easiest way to, if you have friends, family, if you're a landlord, or if you're a renter and having issues, is to email castle@newhavenct.gov. I did send a one-pager to the chair that he could pass out as well. We're trying to get the word out as best we can to everybody. I have a meeting to jump on at 7 to discuss the same thing. So if you know anybody that's having a struggle, just send us an email and we'll get them in the queue and we can speak with them. And if we can't help them, we'll figure out who can and we'll pass that along. That's basically what I wanted to say, Carmen.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Just to jump in, Carmen, I dropped in the chat a link to the application for Castle from the LCI website, so you can go ahead and take a look at that. It's quite long, but it sounds like there's someone at LCI that'll help you out.
Absolutely.
Reach out if you need it. Carmen, back to you.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and have a good evening.
You too.
So my little report is about Worcester Street Memorial Park. We got together this afternoon, early this afternoon, and discussed the ping pong table, which has to finally get put in. We spotted a location, and it should be installed within the next 4 weeks. So that's a good thing for that little park. Also, the toys came in, and I'm so excited about the dinosaur. You have no idea. I want to ride it. I do. It is absolutely fantastic. And what they're going to do is they're going to carve out a little toddler space where the swings are. They're going to reverse the 2 little bucket seats and then put the 3 toys properly spaced around there. So there'll be like a little toddler area so they can enjoy the toys. They're also going to repair the surface underneath the swings because it is really worn out. It's been used a great deal, and we like to see that, but we also want to repair it so that other kids can enjoy it as well. So we're refurbishing that area. There's also a garden around the flagpole. I don't know if you guys have looked at it lately, but it looks pretty bad. It's pretty sad. So we talked about locating the water supply there and having one day where volunteers will come and plant flowers around the flagpole. So I'll let you know a little bit more about that, what day we decide to do that. We also want to have a cleanup day. The park really needs cleaning. It has to be raked, litter has to be picked up, and we want to make it fun. We want to make it on a Saturday, from a 9 to 12 kind of thing, and for people to just gather together and do something good. So again, I'll let you know the date of the cleanup, and hopefully we can get a lot of volunteers. That's so far it. That's the most exciting part of my report. Worcester Square looks terrific. I was around it today. It's holding, it's stable, and it's just a real pleasure to work the area. And if you need anything whatsoever, give me a call, 203-410-6527. And that's my cell phone number, so you'll get me directly.
I'll vouch for that. She'll pick up.
Carmen, it's Charlotte. I'll volunteer my mom and myself to help coordinate a planting in Worcester Square Park.
Oh, I love your mom and I love you too. And that would be great.
Yeah, so
give me a call.
Okay, we'll call you.
Thank
Carmen,
you.
I also wanted to ask if there's any way we could clarify whether dogs are allowed or not in that park.
I can answer that. We've gone back and forth with parks. Back when Becky Bombero was chief, dogs are allowed in any city park on leash. There is a sign up that does not make sense, that does not hold up to any
That's why I asked.
regulation. There is a sign there. It should probably be removed because
Yeah.
it is against the Parks Department's own policy that there are not dogs allowed in that park. There are dogs allowed on leash, and any dog owner is required to clean up after themselves and keep their dog under control. So if you see that not happening, that should be addressed.
Right.
But I do know that there are some neighbors around there that get very heated about seeing dogs in that park, and that has caused a lot of problems, and police have been
It's
called.
when they're off leash, especially that we need to be paying attention to. But the sign needs to be changed, and we've tried to get that changed for a while, but it hasn't. So.
Yeah, and then there was a new sign that went up that said dogs could be allowed, and then that was graffitied, and there's a whole thing.
Right.
There's a bit of a dog cold war going on over there.
Thank
what do
you.
you do? But yeah,
I just sent an email to Bill Carone, so let me know. Let me know if
Well, thank
anything
you, Mayor.
changes.
we should have the mayor in more meetings. This is very helpful, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for being here, Justin. All right, so LCI, we're not, unfortunately, Carmen, we have some less pleasurable conversation to go on, and that's on the building that fell down, or the side of the building that fell down. I think we have a bunch of questions. We want to figure out what happened there. You know, I think for the, maybe it'd be worth really unpacking the timeline of that building here, and please, anybody feel free to jump in that has any expertise on it. So back in September of 2019, I'm sorry, back in May of 2020, there we go. Back in May of 2020, a letter was sent to the building owner saying that the building was unsafe after a hole appeared in the side of the building. You may have seen the press. Some people say that there is a car that hit the building. Some people don't know anything about a car. So it's a big question what happened there. Clearly there's some insurance issue now, but we'll get that. We'll get to that. So a letter was sent from the building department to the owner. The building's owned by Sublime Ventures LLC, which is a subsidiary of it's a LLC owned by Avi Mir, who's also building the new construction on 98 Olive Street. So that big parking lot that got scraped up, and they're building those two big new white buildings. He was very pleasant and came and really, I think, was very good in listening to the community about the construction of that building, which we will celebrate. But now I think we have a problem with a building that was neglected, right? And I think it's fair to say it was neglected when the side falls off unprompted. So a letter was sent in May. Nothing was done until September, when for some reason the building was then, there was a final notice issued and everybody had removed from the building because the building was considered no longer safe to live in. It is interesting to know that half the building is owned by one owner and half the building by the other owner. So the side that the building, that the wall fell off on is owned by Sublime, because I think there's some other, maybe another owner in that group. And then the other half is owned by two set of gentlemen. It looks like a private owner. And that side's been occupied. So there have been people living in one side of the building while the other half of the building, even though it's all one structure, had been considered unsafe. So that's an interesting question there that we'd like some answers to. Then between, you know, so there's a final notice that goes out and says this building must be immediately brought up to code. What happens between September of 2020 and, you know, May 12th of 2021 when the building falls off, or when the side of the building falls off, right? And then, you know, on the night that it fell down, it seems like it was a pretty intensive use of city resources to secure the area, to find new housing, to close the street down, to, you know, get the fire department out there. You know, this is all, and of course, buildings never fall down during convenient times. They always fall down in the middle of the night when no one's on duty, and really, you know, there's overtime. There's a lot of things happening there. So there's a cost to the city that's been assumed here. There's the, you know, threat to public safety that happened between May of 2020 and May of 2021. So there's an entire year that goes by there. And it seems like it has raised a lot of questions. We've brought it up in this meeting many times, and haven't gotten answers that we find sufficient. And we've talked to Carmen about this, and I think that, you know, Carmen, we really want to just double down and say that we understand that that LCI really has powers limited to blight. And the building wasn't blighted. The building was damaged, but it wasn't blighted. So this seems to be an issue that we now need to really get some questions answered from the building department. So I guess my first question, and I'll open it up to anybody else who want to ask some more, is like, what power does the city have to enforce these letters? These, you know, the letter goes out saying your building's unsafe. You need to be immediate. You need to immediately bring it up to code. What happens after that?
Well, my understanding would be that there would be a code inspector assigned, a building inspector assigned to that particular address, and it would be incumbent upon them to go there periodically to look at the condition of the building and, you know, to raise any issues that they have to raise. In this case, it would be writing a letter saying you haven't complied, and, you know, we need to get this moving. We need to get the repair moving.
And so, I mean, I imagine there has to be some ability that the city can then, like, can either compel the owner to do something or to take whatever measures that needs to be taken to protect, you know, public safety. And that might then result in the city taking on some cost, but then we can put a lien on the property, is my understanding, if that's the way that works.
Yes, we will, if the city does anything, for example, with blight, if the city has to go in and clean a property, we do lien the property for the costs of the workers and stuff. So, yeah, if the city would have to do anything, it would lien the owners, the house.
I visited the site last week. By the way, I don't know how a car crashes into that building, just given the angles, but maybe that's possible. I don't know the full history of everything that went on, but the city required them to vacate the property. The city required them to secure the lot next door so people could not approach the building. I believe, my understanding is that the city, if it's a public safety hazard that goes beyond the site itself, the city could condemn the building. I don't know if that was explored. I know that I spoke with the Avi last week as well, and they had some dispute with the insurance company, but of course, some dispute with the insurance company should not delay a public safety interest. So, you know, it is what it is. I know that they're all working on addressing it now. And I reached out to Jim Tercio to get an update on what the status is.
Yeah, that'd be good to hear that back too.
And I would probably assume at this point that Jim Tercio would probably write a letter, very strong letter to Avi, to the company, and state what needs to be done, and probably give them a timeline. And that probably will be recorded on the land records so that the public can see. There's a transparency there.
Yeah. And Ian, to your point about the extra cost to the city had to shut down the street and have police officers on site for the entire time that the street was shut down. And we'll be pursuing reimbursement for that. I am not clear about our legal authority to do so, but we will be doing so if we have that legal authority.
Excellent.
I've already talked to Jim about that as well.
That's good to hear. Anstrus, I see a hand. You're on mute, Anstrus.
If the letters went out from the building department in May and September, and we've kept pushing on this during all of that time, nothing happened. There was a plan that was put together for bracing that would have prevented this collapse while they were waiting to create their own plan. And so there was quite a few months, and it's been under discussion here, that the bracing wasn't done. And at our last meeting, Carmen reported that Jim Tercio had given, and she wasn't sure whether it was in writing or verbal, the owner's permission to just leave the inadequate bracing in place. And he told a reporter for the New Haven Independent that he had deemed the building safe as it was. That was in January, that a reporter from the Independent talking to him wrote to us and said that Jim Tercio considered it safe, and it clearly wasn't. So we're obviously very concerned about this, and it seems that the city, really has the powers to address situations like this when they happen, and it really needs to be addressed. And they even had more leverage in this case because during the same period, this owner was negotiating to obtain city-owned land on the corner of Chapel and Olive for yet another development. So they had money, they were looking to buy land, and they've started construction there. And the neglect of this site, we need to get a real answer about how they were allowed to neglect this and let it get to this point when they were getting many benefits from the city. For instance, a city-owned or New Haven Parking Authority-owned lot and approvals on another project. So I just want to make a note of that.
Just to be clear, Anstrus, I'm not aware of Jim Tercio saying that building was safe in January of this year.
Yeah. Well,
there were no people living in the building for a reason, and that was because the city.
I agree with that. It was a strange thing, but that was apparently what he said to a reporter. That,
I don't see that in the independent article either. So I think we just need to confirm that.
okay, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think that Anstrus does raise an interesting point here about and I think that, let me take a step back. I think this is a moment to really think about what it means to be a developer in our city, right? And what it means to be a good neighbor, and what the city needs to do to make sure that developers are being good neighbors, right? And I think that that's also incumbent on us, as neighbors, to push when we see things that aren't right. So here we have a very expensive new building getting built within a half a block of a building which has fallen down, and it just doesn't sit right. Right? Those don't jive. So I think this is one of those things that we're going to watch, we're going to follow up, and we're going to keep watching. One of the things that we talked about coming out of this meeting is coming up with a running log of all the issues in our neighborhood, and we're going to share it in our emails and put it on our website, because we want to make sure that we don't lose track of issues as they come up, but also other people can watch what we're watching. So as neighbors, we ask everybody here to send us those issues, and that's everything from, we keep hearing from Tony that the U-Haul is doing work at 3 a.m. or putting signs on the sidewalk. That's those management signs that are on the side of your building in a historic district. Those aren't allowed. Those are pretty minimal ones. To this building has a hole in it, and it seems like it's unsafe. And what's going on with that? So we're going to keep logging that. We're going to keep watching that. And I think this is where our partnership with Carmen, our neighborhood specialist from LCI, she's our eyes and ears. She's the one driving around out there, and if she can, know that we have a log and she can, chime in on that, then maybe we can really address things a little more quickly. So this is something that we're going to be watching, because I know that there's a lot of stuff going on in our city, including that giant hole next to City Hall, which it doesn't look so great either, does it? So the question about when that's going to get filled in. Although it wouldn't be downtown without mentioning Yale, because then you walk around Yale and you see their construction sites, and they are pristine. Beautiful fencing. It's always clean. There's never graffiti on it. They're always rewrapped. You walk over here to Chapel Street where the new Heinz building is going up, and it's a disaster. There's, old dirt Jersey barriers in the street with raggedy, sharp, like concrete pointing off of them. Their construction workers park all over the place illegally, constantly. I've called parking many, many times to make sure that they can clear out the corners where they're parked in front of fire hydrants. These are builders and developers coming in that they just don't seem to be as respectful to our city as, and everybody who knows me, it's gonna be shocking to say, as Yale is being. The university is doing a much better job in building buildings that are going to last, and making sure that their construction sites are clean and polite to the neighbors. Now, they mostly happen to be their neighbors, or their neighbors are themselves. But for the rest of us, we do appreciate it. So I think this is something that we all want to see more of. And any more, all right. So, let's move on, because I don't want to beat all the time. But before we move on, I heard a rumor, Carmen. And I want to ask you if this rumor is true, that LCI could potentially be rotating its neighborhood specialists, and we might lose you. Have you heard anything about this?
Yes. They periodically will move neighborhood specialists around. And in this particular case, we lost Lori Lopez. She went over to Public Works, and Fairhaven now has no neighborhood specialist. So I had taken on Fairhaven temporarily until we hired someone. And it might just be that I might be assigned exclusively to Fairhaven.
Alder Kupos, jump on the queue.
Thanks, Ann. Carmen, I'm shocked and really upset to hear that, actually, because you're an incredibly valuable part of our neighborhood, an incredibly valuable part of my team. I am a little shocked. I'm just wondering, is there something we can do to prevent that from happening?
I really don't know. I really don't know, in all honesty. I mean, I just don't know. And I haven't formally been given a letter yet. So I'm still doing Worcester Square, and I am doing Fairhaven, to be perfectly honest with you. I will do both. I would do both gladly. I love Worcester Square. I love the people in Worcester Square. You know, my heart, you know, palpitates really fast because I get a lot of anxiety just thinking about leaving. But, you know, ultimately the director and my immediate supervisor I have to do what they tell me. But I haven't gotten an official notice yet. But yes, I am doing Fairhaven, and people have seen me there. And I'm enforcing the blight laws and all the other stuff that I did for Worcester Square. And I hope to continue to work with Worcester Square. I really love the neighborhood and I love the people.
Yeah,
I've
I
enjoyed
mean,
it all.
I would say, you know, for me, you were one of my first partners when I began this role of alder here in the neighborhood. And I think if there's anything that I can do, and I'm sure that there are people on this call who will support me, I'd love to do anything that I can to make sure that you stay with us and that you can remain our partner and my partner in this neighborhood.
Oh, gee, thank you so much. That touches my heart. Thank you so much.
I'd like to add something to that too, Carmen, and bring the mayor in on this. You did such good work trying to, with the blight category on property 112 Worcester Street. And you worked really hard on that, and you got to the point where fines could be put against the property owner who hasn't finished his building project in over 2 years. Its entire property is covered with rubble and debris. You went forward with all the work, and then the building department, I think it was Tertio, just pulled the rug from under you and said no. And we found that very disheartening. We've been complaining, myself and Sage Arts, about this problem for over 2 years. And all of a sudden, we got some real work done by Carmen. And then all of a sudden, Tertio or the building department just says no. And I want to know why. I know the property, the guy doing the building is the son of a very rich guy associated with Yale. And I want to know if there's a problem with that with the city. How come we can't get a piece of property cleaned up? We didn't ask him to do anything major, just clean up the mess he's left there for over 2 years. And the city refused to back her. Why? She did her job and she did it excellently. Why, Mr. Mayor?
Tony, what building are you talking about?
112 Worcester Street, the old Italian American Club. Okay, they originally wanted to put 10 units on the property. The city refused because we put up a fight, but the city said they could then put 2 more units on, a total of 6 units. Now, this project has been underway for more than 2 years. It's not that big of a project. They don't even have the roof on yet. They don't have the outside of the building finished. There's building materials all over the back parking lot, which is right up against my building and right up against Sage Arts condo. We've gone through all the regular channels, and we just seem to be disregarded somewhere along the line. We would like to see something happen.
I'm happy to look into it. I suspect there's more to the story than Jim Tercio just saying no to something. I've found that typically when there's an issue, it's more complicated than I ever imagined. But I'm happy to look into it.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
As far as Carmen goes, to be honest, this is news to me. I think that historically, this has come up years ago with district managers, where people get really used to their district manager. The district manager also gets really used to the neighborhood in a good way. of understanding the ins and outs of different streets, getting to know the people, whether it's the shop owners or the residents, and that relationship is very, very important to community policing. And I would say that LCI is very much the same. I don't know fully and try not to micromanage things, the background here, but I'll talk with folks. You know, obviously we'd love to keep Carmen in the same spot. At the same time, with staffing issues and changes, sometimes it's not possible. But I'm happy to look into it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your support on that. I feel like we've just started to launch a bunch of good projects and have built new trust and new relationships where we have a couple more years work to do.
I hear you, and just to be clear, so I am not surprised and definitely hear that people would want to keep Carmen, but I also do not want to promise that Carmen, that I don't want to undermine the staffing changes that have been probably well thought out. So I'll look into it and pass the message along.
Yes, no, I understand that. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on LCI before we turn over to the alders? Go ahead, Justin.
And having lived in East Rock, I lost Carmen because she was my LCI rep how many years ago? So.
Oh my, yes. And I love East Rock too. Wherever I go, I make relationships with people, and people have treated me very nicely, and I try my hardest to do what I can. And it's very hard when people get changed around because you feel like a piece of you is torn apart, you know?
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, no, these relationships are amazing. And to the mayor, I apologize for using your first name. I met the mayor a long time ago back as an electrician.
Oh my gosh, Ian.
Just down the street. So
my name is still Justin.
Okay, good. Appreciate that. All right, now over to our alders. I will say that it's 7 o'clock. So if anybody has anything that is duplicitous of each other, maybe you could kind of trim it a little bit. And then I think the rest of our meeting tonight is going to be pretty quick. And then we'll save a bunch of time for the mayor to give any sort of update that he wants to give. All right, so let's start with Alder Sabin.
All right, thank you so much, Ian, and great to see everyone, and great to have a robust conversation as we always do in these meetings. I have a few updates. So on the budget and financially, there are a number of moving parts right now, so I want to just clue folks in on that. There were some amendments passed to the budget last Thursday. The full board is going to vote on the budget next Wednesday. On Thursday of this week, the budget committee is having a discussion about how we're going to spend $94 million in American Recovery Act funding. The community development block grant funding process is also ongoing, which I've been in a number of meetings with Alder Cupo about through the Community Development Committee and the Health and Human Services Committee. And so if you have any thoughts about the budget, about the community development block grant process, about the American Recovery Act spending, we want to hear from you. So please reach out and let us know where you think that money should be going in our community, because we want to know what you're thinking. Separately, I also wanted to give a couple updates about a few things I've been working on. One is that the noise ordinance amendment that I worked on, especially with Alder Roth, passed unanimously through the legislation committee a couple weeks ago. And that's going to help us crack down on trash haulers who have been showing up all over the city before 5 a.m. in violation of city law. So we're excited about that, and it will hopefully be going to a vote in front of the full board in the next few weeks. So that's exciting. And also, I've been working on adding some new bike lanes downtown, and I think we should be getting 3 new bike lanes in Ward 1 and on the borders with Ward 22 and I think Ward 7 also, on York Street between Elm and Grove, so like where Yorkside Pizza is, then on Wall Street from College to Orange, and then on what's the third one? On Chapel from Temple to College. So, and that's the hill on the side of the green, which is always a little bit of a difficult stretch. I bike around the city a lot. So I'm excited about this. And if you have any other suggestions about where we can add more bike and pedestrian infrastructure in downtown, please let me know. I'm all ears. And then another thing I wanted to mention, it's obviously been a very difficult week in the city for our partners in law enforcement and the fire department. So I wanted to put the link for the GoFundMe for firefighter Torres' family. Just a heartbreaking tragedy, and we owe an incredible debt to him and his family. And then in that same vein, there have been 2 murders and 3 shootings in the last week in the city. And so if anybody has any information, I'm going to drop the city's anonymous tip line in the chat as well. And then, as always, if you have anything that you think I should know about, and I think my colleagues probably feel the same way, please let us know, and I'll put my contact information in the chat. Thank you.
Alder Roth?
Thank you, Ian. And I'm glad to be here tonight. I usually can't attend because I'm on the Public Safety Committee and it meets at the same time, but happily they're not meeting tonight. I have a very easy job because Alder Sapin gave a great update. Just a few additional things. One, just on the topic of bike lanes, myself and my colleague from Ward 3 had put in a request for a bike lane in response to the cyclist who was killed at York, going on York across South Frontage. And we had 2 parts to the request. One was to remove the turn arrow in the middle lane, which is getting removed. The bike lane is sort of on hold because of the downtown crossing project, which is gonna, this is also just a reminder, completely change the traffic pattern in that area starting around June 1st. That York Street is gonna turn 2-way between South Frontage Road and Howard Avenue, and South Frontage Road is going to be closed between College and Church Street. And there's going to be a lot of detours. And I think you all had a presentation on that from the downtown crossing folks. But if you haven't yet signed up for the link for all the changes, I can put that in the chat because it's definitely going to change starting soon. But that did impact our request for the bike lane because of the switch to the 2-way traffic. But hopefully the 2-way traffic on York Street will actually slow traffic. I'll just mention 3 other things quickly. Quick reminder with Memorial Day, which is not far away, just remember that trash and recycling will be 1 day later that week. This week, tonight, actually, and then the next 2 days, CT Transit is having a whole bunch of hearings, and I can put that link in the chat as well about changes to the bus service, including extending it till 1 a.m., which would be great. So I think testimony in support is encouraged. So again, I'll put that in the bike lane. And finally, I just want to thank a couple of people on this call, including the mayor, for coming and helping with the project that we did this weekend to connect downtown with East Rock, which we've been working on actually for almost 3 years to get approval from the state to paint in the underpass on State Street, basically State and Bradley, the underpass of the highway. And because it's state property, it took a long time to get permission. But it looks beautiful now. It's not quite done, but if you get a chance to pass by, and the one positive thing about the long process was I think the state realized that it was a convoluted process, and the state and city worked together to kind of make kind of a template now for approving these going forward, and gave some funding. So hopefully I'm thinking of, for example, the underpass on Chapel Street past Worcester Square. Hopefully for locations like that, it will be a lot easier going forward to make community murals, which just connect neighborhoods that the highways cut apart and just make everything look more beautiful. So like my colleague, if you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder Roth. I don't see Alder Rodriguez with me. If you are here, please correct me. If not, Alder Cupo.
Thanks, Ian. So to back up both of my colleagues and kind of underscore that folks should come to, we have a special meeting on the budget next week. As Alder Simon mentioned, we have deliberations. There's a finance committee meeting tomorrow, but the bulk of my updates are, I'm going to drop some flyers in the chat There are vaccinations available on Long Wharf and at 54 Meadow Street. If you know anyone who is not yet vaccinated, who is on the fence, who needs to get their second shot, send them there. I'll drop those in the chat. Next thing is the weather is getting beautiful. I was really lucky to take part in a neighborhood cleanup on Lion Street a couple weeks ago, which now feels like an eternity ago. But I'm hoping to do something similar in Jocelyn Square Park. So I'm also going to drop a link for folks who might be interested in future Ward 8 cleanups, including in Jocelyn Square Park. And then, you know, since 335 St. John Street is in my neighborhood, Ian and I got to kind of escape for a couple of days and get some rest and kind of come back to try to be rejuvenated for what is going to be a busy summer. And it was incredibly upsetting to hear that this had happened. And so I'm very much paying attention to what is going to come in terms of keeping that building, what is going to happen with the building, keeping our neighbors safe. Which also kind of leads me to this, and I want to just kind of quickly make a point about this idea of respect from the folks who are developing in our city. I think one of the things that I ran on, my God, what's it like again, an eternity ago, was developments that are in the character of the neighborhood. And when we compare and contrast the construction sites of Yale University, which has been building the entire pandemic, and Hines, I just want to make it clear, I have communicated to economic development multiple times, not just over email, but also in person, about my absolute disgust by the site, the look of the site. I have pressed folks on this call to actually engage Hines to get them to clean up the construction site to replace the wrapping that protects people, and nothing has been done, and that is incredibly upsetting. This is not just my view, but it's also the view of many of my neighbors, many of you who I talk to on a regular basis. And so I just want it to be known that when we talk about respect, which is something I believe that our city deserves, I think it also means enforcing that we have safe construction sites that, you know, it may be an early step of construction, but that does not necessarily mean that it shouldn't be clean and safe. I'm also going to drop all of my information in the chat, so look out for a whole bunch of stuff from me. Always good to be with you all, and thank you for a spicy evening.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for our alders? I'm going to put it all into one and pick and choose. Seeing none? Seeing none? All right. All right, so now we're going to go into our more expansive programs and presentations for the evening. First up, Festival Arts and Ideas Executive Director Shelley Quiala. Correct me if I said your last name incorrectly.
I was going to. You were very close. It's Kiala. Kiala. You were very close. It's okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. And I just want to acknowledge and thank Elsie Chapman, who was the first person I met when I stepped foot on the ground in New Haven almost a year ago now, and is also a board member at the festival and a longtime resident. So thanks, Elsie, for the invitation. So I landed in New Haven in August, early August, to be the executive director of the International Festival of Arts and Ideas. It's been, you know, I know it's a pandemic. I know it's been a challenging time for the city. I have found nothing but warmth and welcome. I really am enjoying getting to know everybody. My kids are at Conti West. I live at the Eli. It's a thrill to be here, and I'm excited to share with you all that we are planning to be officially, as we got the permit approved, thank you, Mayor's office, on the ground on the green this year for the festival. So we've started some events already. I'm going to drop a link in the chat with everything that you need to know about the festival. You can navigate on the site. There are virtual ideas events happening. Joy Harjo is speaking this week. We have a number of food events that you can engage with virtually as well, leading up all the way until mid-June. And then on June 18th, we have developed a very robust COVID safety plan that will inform our presence on the green, and have been in touch with a variety of city departments. I was in conversation with the Downtown Evening Soup Kitchen leadership earlier this week to ensure that we're mindful and respectful of the residents of the green, and that they're a part of the experience and are aware of the plans. And so that is all coming the end of June. You can get reservations. We are asking for reserved seats, but it's free. So it's not the green experience that you have been used to previously because of COVID. We are attempting to keep people safe through pods and through contact tracing by early registration. So just keep an eye on the website. There's COVID safety information up there in Spanish and English. And in the spirit of this meeting, which everyone is so generous with your contact information, I'm going to put my email and phone number up here, and you can reach out to me if you need anything. And we're just really, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm really excited to meet you in Zoom, and hope to be able to meet you in person if you feel safe coming down. Also know that if you don't feel safe coming down, or you have neighbors that don't, that we are streaming everything. So you can have a full festival experience in your house, in your apartment, and you can still see the events on the green without coming down to the green.
Thank you so much, Shelley. I think the festival is one of the things that makes New Haven incredibly special. So thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for making it work in crazy times. I grew up volunteering for the festival, and it's I think some of my best memories of the green involve giant wooden puppets and crazy things. So back in the day. All right, next up. So our agenda had a gateway on here again. As I said, they're going to be held till next week. So it's a New Haven food policy. Kim Acosta.
Hi everyone, thanks for having us here today. I'm actually joined by Director Latha Swami, and she'll launch our presentation for tonight.
Hi everyone. We both have slides, so I'll just get that up now. So if everything looks good. As mentioned, I am Latha Swami. I'm the Director of Food Policy for the City of New Haven. Good to see many of you, and thanks to those of you who have literally seen this presentation like 4 times for coming along for the ride again. So today I'll start off with a snapshot of some relevant data just to kind of orient us, describe the unique division that I lead within municipal government, and then we'll talk about some exciting work we have around urban farming as it relates to health, climate resilience, and equity. So just to quickly orient everyone, as we all know, New Haven is a small, diverse city with deep and enduring economic and social disparities. Of New Haven's 130,000 residents, roughly 1/3 identify as Black, 1/3 as white, and 1/3 as Hispanic Latinx. Median annual income is $38,000 as compared to $71,000 statewide. Half our residents are low income, and 1/4 are living in poverty. Prior to COVID, across New Haven, almost 1/4 of the city's residents were food insecure, much higher than 13% statewide and 11% nationwide. As is true for most cities, racial and ethnic disparities widen when considering the historically defined low-income neighborhoods, which are predominantly Black and Brown communities. These communities also endure disproportionately worse health outcomes and increased mortality rates because of systemic and structural inequities. In nearly all of New Haven's Black and Brown neighborhoods, rates of chronic disease are significantly higher than New Haven's overall, especially among those who are already food insecure. Prompted in part by these staggering data, a group of community food system advocates successfully lobbied the City of New Haven to create the Food System Policy Division in 2016. This was made possible through generous funding from the Kendall Foundation. I came on board to lead the division at the end of 2018, just as the city incorporated this role into its general fund budget. For some of you, this may be the first time you are hearing about a role like this, and that's not surprising. There are approximately only 20 other food policy directors housed in municipal government throughout the United States. It's also important to note that since its inception, the division has never been allocated a programmatic budget within the city. But recently we were able to secure some grant funding, allowing me to bring on additional team members and expand our scope of work. This includes Kimberly Acosta, as we know she's on the call with us and will be presenting in a bit, as our new food policy analyst, And we also have Lexi Basil on our team, who is a CARES Act funded position, temporarily serving as the food system admin. Since the division is quite new and there were no explicit mandates, there was a lot of flexibility to shape the city's work around food and ag policy. Something that we must all understand is that slavery and colonization have enabled and ensured the growth and development of the food and agriculture systems in the US. Therefore, food systems transformation is inseparable from rectifying these harms by dismantling racism and other structural injustices. In the division's work, we strive to embody these values. Our mission is to support and help manifest community-led efforts that envision and create an environmentally sustainable and socially just food system. We operate through a food justice framework and across these three thematic priorities: health equity, socioeconomic justice, and environmental justice. The core of these three themes spotlight our goal of developing and supporting anti-racist food, farming, and land use policies. Additionally, the division takes a both-and approach. In addition to supporting programs that provide critical resources and social safety nets, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, the division also focuses on addressing root causes and striving for systemic change. For example, upstream solutions such as economic security or secure land access and ownership. Since the community-driven efforts are a priority for our division, much of our work is done through coalition building across departments, institutions, and through knowledge sharing and action networks from the local to international scale. For example, internationally, New Haven sits on the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact Steering Committee and was the first North American signatory to the new Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration. On the national level, I meet biweekly with my fellow food policy directors under the umbrella of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And of course, our lifeblood comes from our local resident and organizational partnerships. This includes advocacy groups such as Witnesses to Hunger, food system nonprofits, local food businesses, and unaffiliated residents. Just to quickly give you all an idea of the breadth of our work, here's a quick snapshot of some threads that we're working on right now. You'll hear more about urban agriculture from Kimberly in just a moment. We're also working on a community composting and food waste reduction project. We're researching equitable sugar reduction approaches. We are just recently received funding to support food entrepreneurs, as well as values-based institutional food procurement, as well as data and mapping across all of these topics. So now let's focus on one thread of our work: urban agriculture. Urban farming can include a variety of food producing spaces, from community, commercial, and institutional farms to backyard gardens, and is supported by many types of stakeholders, resources, and policies. The health, social, economic, and environmental benefits of urban ag are many. It often makes use of vacant lots, provides a direct participatory connection to the land and the farmer, offers recreation opportunities, and a solid social network for farmers, job training, and job opportunities. City residents have healthy, fresh produce readily available, and urban farmers have closer proximity to markets, a large customer base, and labor force. Urban working lands also contribute to climate resilience by helping with stormwater management, mitigating the heat island effect, and supporting habitat for pollinators and other biodiverse species. But we must also contend with challenges that urban farmers face if urban farms are to become widespread and viable. These challenges include dealing with soil contaminants, water availability, limited growing space, high land values, high costs for water, infrastructure, permits, housing, etc. So how do we overcome these barriers in New Haven with limited funding and staffing? Sorry about that. Well, that's why I'm absolutely thrilled to share that we recently received 2 first ever grants from the USDA's new Office of Urban Ag and Innovative Production. We are very proud to have secured both the UAIP Competitive Planning Grant and the Community Composting Cooperative Agreement. New Haven has a long history of urban ag, with many of its community gardens starting in the 1980s. In recent years, it has witnessed the growth of a small and dynamic urban ag community. A recent study found that over 80% of New Haven's residents live within half a mile of a community garden, urban farm, or farmer's market. Notably, the majority of these farms and gardens are concentrated in the lowest income and most racially diverse neighborhoods. Despite these achievements, there are several municipal and systemic barriers that prevent urban ag from fully thriving in New Haven. These barriers include city processes that are opaque and cumbersome, non-existent and outdated zoning and land use policies, including the remnants of racist practices such as redlining, difficulty accessing knowledge and financial resources, and the threat of gentrification. These systemic barriers prevent residents, especially Black and Brown communities, from fully experiencing the benefits that urban ag offers. So now I'll hand it over to Kimberly, who will get more into the details of our specific urban ag work as it relates to our grant funding. Thank you, everyone.
Hopefully everything looks great. Hi, everyone. As Latha mentioned, my name is Kimberly Acosta, and I'm the food policy analyst for the division. I'm excited to be here today to speak with you about the creation of New Haven's first urban agriculture master plan. My computer is a bit slow, so I'm going to turn my video off, but you should all be able to hear everything perfectly fine. So this project is the perfect example of when all of our division's priorities, environmental justice, health equity, and socioeconomic justice intersect. We are proud to say that this is currently our most community-directed initiative. The city's first urban agriculture master plan will be created over the next 3 years through an inclusive, community-led process. The plan will be an action-oriented blueprint for urban agriculture growth and development that will ultimately increase access to land and opportunities so we can better support the production and sale of locally grown foods, build and strengthen community, improve public health and well-being, and provide economic opportunity, especially in areas that have empty or underused land and low access to food. As Latha already shared, this project and my position are funded entirely by the UAIP grant that we received. The guiding values of this project are equity, community involvement and ownership, and protection against gentrification and displacement. Protection against gentrification and displacement is especially important because it has been associated with urban agriculture in several major cities, and we want to prevent this from happening in New Haven. In alignment with these values, we want to work with residents who aren't usually involved in these types of processes or affiliated with organizations or institutions that already have access and power within the city. More specifically, we want to work with individuals from disinvested communities. For this project, we define disinvested communities as those that experience injustice. And when we say inequities, we essentially mean unfair or unjust impacts when compared to other communities. Examples include those with low incomes, returning or previously incarcerated residents, immigrants and new Americans, regardless of citizenship status, those with experience with houselessness, those who identify as LGBTQ+, and those who identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color, which I will refer to as BIPOC throughout the rest of my presentation. People of color include Hispanics and Latinos, South Asian, East Asian, Middle Eastern, Arab, Pacific Islander, and other non-white communities. Ultimately, we want to create an environment that will support all residents so that they can benefit from urban agriculture and its positive health, social, economic, and environmental impacts. More specifically, we want to eliminate long-standing regulatory resource and information barriers to engaging in urban agriculture and provide a cohesive strategy to create clear, easy to navigate city processes, update zoning regulations and land use policies, improve access to knowledge and financial resources, and better connect with BIPOC, vulnerable, and disinvested communities. We see this 3-year process as the opportunity to build authentic, long-term relationships with residents. There are 3 thematic pathways for the Urban Ag Master Plan. The first is creating an equitable and enabling policy environment, and this will essentially focus on reducing the policy and zoning barriers that exist for urban agriculture based on best practices and needs identified by the community. One exciting outcome of this pathway will be the creation and distribution of user-friendly, multilingual urban agriculture guides and toolkits. They'll also be multi-format, so available in video and audio as well. The second pathway is socioeconomic viability, and this will essentially focus on analyzing New Haven's capacity to support urban agriculture businesses. We want to ensure demand can meet supply when it comes to local products, and the economic benefits are fairly distributed across the neighborhoods. This capacity will be determined through feedback from a newly and yet to be established Small Businesses for Urban Agriculture Working Group and the community. For this aspect of our work, we will especially focus on partnering with hyper-local businesses. The third and final pathway is mobilizing resources for workforce development and training. And this will essentially identify the current local, state, regional, and national pathways to education, jobs, and resources for new farmers. And in alignment with community priorities, We will also identify any transferable programming and barriers to implementation that exist that are specific to New Haven, and any solutions that will be needed to overcome those barriers. Today, we're here to highlight what I consider the most exciting part of this project, and that's the creation of the Community Advisory Board that will co-lead the entire process alongside our division. It will consist of up to 60 members who will be paid $25 an hour to share their knowledge and guidance. They will commit up to 34 hours of their time each year for the entire 3 years. The application is currently available on our website in 8 different languages, specifically Spanish, English, Arabic, Mandarin, Swahili, Farsi, French, and Portuguese, and we are accepting applications until Tuesday, June 15th. To reduce barriers to participation, we will have translation and translated materials available, and when we are able to meet in person, childcare will also be provided. The Community Advisory Board will be split into 4 groups with different areas of expertise. Neighborhood experts will know a lot about their neighborhood and its residents. For this group, we are prioritizing the involvement of disinvested neighborhoods such as Dixwell, Fairhaven, The Hill, and New Hallville. Community health experts will be familiar with the health needs and challenges of their communities. Urban farming experts will have knowledge of urban agriculture activities and its related businesses in New Haven and Connecticut. Examples of urban agriculture activities include backyard or community gardening, composting, growing flowers, and keeping animals, which include chickens, bees, the list goes on. Youth experts will be 14 to 22 years old, and they will have an interest or be involved in urban agriculture activities, whether that's through personal or family experience or participation in educational or nonprofit programming. For those who are interested in this process but might not want to serve on the Community Advisory Board, we will also be holding monthly community-wide meetings that will rotate between neighborhoods in order to increase access to participation in this process. We want to make sure that throughout the 3 years, we're getting feedback from different community members. If you're interested in applying, please visit the link on this website, on this slide, sorry, or use your camera to scan the QR code beneath, and Lata will also insert the information in the chat box. I'd like to emphasize that formal or significant experience with urban agriculture is not required to join the Community Advisory Board. We're encouraging anyone that is interested to apply. So please tell your friends and family. We want to reach as many residents as possible. If you'd like to follow some of our other work that Latha mentioned in her presentation, please visit our website and social media. Otherwise, thank you so much for having us both here tonight. We look forward to answering any questions you might have. But if we do run out of time or you think of a question you would like to ask later, please feel free to email or call us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Anybody have any questions? Well, seeing none, well, make sure that we include all these in, if you actually could do 2 things. If you could email us the deck and we'll put that in our minutes as well as the recording of this and share the, and that goes for anybody who's presenting. Any deck ever, we'll always send it out. So feel free to have it. Oh yeah, arts and ideas, we'd love yours. All right, next up, Michelle Humbert from the New Haven County Association of Black Social Workers.
Hi, everyone. I appreciate you guys having me come to the meeting. I'm sorry my camera isn't on. The pollen has been attacking everybody aggressively, and I am a victim of that. So bear with me as my voice is a little raspy. So I am a social worker who is from New Haven, born and raised, and I currently serve as a member on the chapter of the New Haven County chapter of Black social workers here. And I am also the social advocacy chairperson. So I'm acting in the role of being able, our committee is acting in a role of being able to come into the New Haven community meetings and our other catchment areas that we're focusing on right now are West Haven and Hamden. So we attend all of the community meetings just to kind of get our faces known and our names known, but as well to also look for partnership and collaboration to help the community advocate for themselves better and also educate on the things that are talked about, some of the things talked about in these meetings. We often know that people do not get to go to some of these meetings and don't have the time to yield time to yield or have the access to be able to get any of this information. So we hope to be somewhat of a bridge for that. Chapter wide, we have other initiatives that we're looking to roll out as well. I am not on those committees, but I can speak that they are focused on health and wellness, professional development, and some educational initiatives that we have coming up. Our chapter is still fairly new and small, and we're looking to expand. So if there are any other social workers or counseling professionals that you know that would be interested in joining our chapter, who are Black or consider themselves in any part of African ancestry, they're more than welcome to come. To further what I'm saying is that hopefully you'll see myself and other committee members from the Social Advocacy Committee join this meeting and other meetings around the city to again, look for partnership, hear what is happening in the community to redistribute this information in a larger fashion. But if you guys have any questions for myself, I will leave my contact information in the email. I will also leave the chapter's contact information if there's anything else that comes to mind that you would like to know more about as well.
Thank you so much. This is exciting. Please feel free to send all that stuff along to the email as well that where we've been communicating, and we'll put that out in the minutes on our social media if you have anything that you want us to uplift. We'd be happy to do that. Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none. And thank you so much, Michelle. All right, last and certainly not least, Mayor Justin Elker.
Thanks, Ian. Good to see everybody. It's always good to sit in on these because you hear about so many exciting things going on. I'll just say a few things because I prefer that I just open up to people's questions. But I did want to talk about where I think we are as a community. We have clearly had a very difficult week and a half, having lost not one but two firefighters. There was a funeral on Friday for one of the firefighters, firefighter McMillian, and firefighter Torres, of course, died last week as well. And in addition, we've had a number of homicides in the last few days. It's been a challenging couple of weeks, but it is has been a very, very challenging year and a half. One of the most challenging the city's ever faced. And I think we can fairly say that overall, we can be very proud about how New Haven has responded to the pandemic and focused on the science and also focused on equity, and whether that's making sure that we had testing available to people from the start, to making sure that every child had a device and access to the internet, making sure that we had specific plans around people experiencing homelessness, and now the vaccine. We still have a long way to go with the vaccine, but we've operated in partnership with Griffin Hospital over 80 pop-ups around the city. We're at, as of last week, around 52% of the cities had at least one shot. Which is very good compared to our other large cities in Connecticut. But we still have a long way to go. So please, please, please encourage others. And if you haven't gotten vaccinated, it's so important. And at the same time, during all these challenges, we have gotten so much more done. We're working on many of the issues that we've talked about earlier this meeting about re-envisioning what it means to think about public safety, creating the crisis response team, implementing new training, having world-class experts on the police commission that can bring new ideas and best practices. And we've gotten some things done that have been elusive for decades. It's a union station deal that the city and the state could never agree upon. We did that in the first 3 months of last year. To make sure that it wasn't just some big parking lot, but had a lot of benefits for the community as well. Tweed, that was announced about 2 weeks ago, that has finally eliminated, the plan will eliminate the city's subsidy for the airport and has significant benefits from the neighborhood, whether from traffic to noise abatement. We've created a reentry welcome center. For decades, Department of Corrections has just dropped people off in New Haven on the green or in front of a police station or Department of Corrections with basically a good luck. And now everyone that comes out of prison is dropped off in front of Project More on Grand Avenue, which is one of your neighbors. And there's a caseworker and peer support specialist that greet them and provide a connection to resources. It's hard enough finding housing and finding a job in New Haven as is, but if you have a record, it is way harder. And having that immediate support when someone arrives is huge. And I wanted to, particularly on the reentry center, express my deep gratitude to the neighborhood for welcoming this proposal. There's over 900 people that come out of prison every year back to New Haven, which is a staggering number. And for the neighborhood to support that effort and say this is a great thing for our community and we welcome this in our neighborhood is huge. We've rehoused over 600 people permanently that were experiencing homelessness, and we're tackling the financial challenges of the city. I could talk to you all day long about that. We're hopeful that we'll get it across the finish line, but we're poised potentially because of the leadership at the state level with Senator Looney and others to get an additional $49 million of pilot funding. Again, this is something that's been talked about for decades and has not happened. We have a lot more work to do, but I am very hopeful at this moment. It's moments of crisis that I think we can really redefine ourselves as a city because we're addressing a lot of these financial challenges, because we're tackling some things that haven't been done in decades, because we're about to receive a significant amount of funding from the federal government that we as a community will decide together how to use. We're going to start a community process with our first meeting next week on the 25th at Hill House at 6 p.m. And we'll be announcing this. I'll send out an email tomorrow, I'll be announcing the details, but there will be a wider community process for how we plan on defining ourselves as a community. And I think oftentimes New Haven kind of comes at things, it almost feels like at a position of weakness, that we don't have enough money, our taxes keep going up. We're in a position of strength now that the funding is important, but it's also, I think, the leadership role that we've played on so many of these major issues, from affordable housing to issues around racial equity to COVID, that puts us in a really strong position to move forward as a city. So it's an exciting time. And of course, I'm looking forward to working with you all in many different capacities on this vision for the future. I'll open it up to questions, and I only take softball questions. Tony.
I have a question for you.
How did I know? How did I know?
Yeah.
There's that guy at every community management team meeting.
Yeah.
What's up, Tony?
What are your plans to put pressure on Yale to come up with more money for property taxes? Because at this point, a bunch of poor people are supporting Yale, and that's just not right.
You're speaking.
Have you got any way to shame them into giving us more money? I'll leave it
You're
up
speaking
to
the
you.
language of a lot of people on this call, just looking at people around the room, Ian and Ellen and Andrew and others. But yeah, so I mean, I've obviously been very, very, very vocal over the past several years about the university needing to do more for the city. We're having productive conversations with the leadership of the university. And I don't have any announcement at the moment, but my sense is that they understand they need to do more for the city. And I'm cautiously optimistic that they will follow through with that. But we're not there yet. And like I said, I'm the first to be vocal about the university's need to do more for the reasons that you highlighted, and the reasons that many people in this meeting and around the city have been working on for years and years and years to lay the groundwork for people to understand that the university needs to play a larger role in the city. I don't mean to dodge your question, Tony. I'll just say I'm working on it.
Okay, thank you.
To piggyback on that, and I just dropped in the chat an article in the Biz Journals, which I know Mayor Alka, you were in, and Alder Ron Hurt was in. And it was a really, I think, an excellent write-up of. I mean, the title is "Death, Taxes, and Ivory Towers." For folks to give it a read, I think you get 4 free reads before it disappears. So check it out.
Thanks, Ian.
I see Anton.
Hi, Mayor. Thanks for coming by and making time for questions. I actually have a set of 3 questions, so I'll just say them first, and then you can choose which one you want to answer and maybe have your staff follow up. But I think a lot of us in this community management team are probably really interested in the crisis unit that you were talking about. So I was just curious if you could talk a little bit more about the implementation timeline and how the triaging works for that, because I imagine there's now a lot of discretion happening at the operator level and whether that's operationalized through 911 and how that works. The second question is related. I was wondering if you could make some assurances on, even if we don't have police as a primary response or some association with the carceral state as the primary response, can you guarantee that it won't be a secondary response? So for example, if an undocumented person needs mental health support, that you get as a secondary response, they don't then get referred to ICE or something like that after getting their initial mental health support. And then the third question is that we talked a little bit earlier about de-escalation training and anti-bias training for police force in particular, but there's also like a lot of bystander trainings and whatnot for civilians. But up to now, I think that this kind of training has been put in the framework of personal consumption, where if it's up to a person who is interested in doing that, or if they're lucky, they may have an employer that will sponsor them to take those kinds of trainings. So I was just curious if there could be any interest from New Haven, the city, into kind of putting it into a more of a civic responsibility framework, and whether the city could think about sponsoring or supporting those trainings and maybe having them done through something like a CMT or other spaces. So those are my 3 questions. Please feel free to address whichever one you'd like. Thank you.
I'll address all 3 and I'll do them backwards. So bystander training, very interested in the idea, the concept. One of the things we've been looking at a number of potential trainings, and one of the things that I think is very important is having training that is recognized and use it on a broader scale, ideally nationally, so that we know that it has some strong backing and data. So if there's suggestions of groups that do this type of training or any sort of certified training, we're very open to it. And please shoot me an email or share it with Lieutenant Marr, and I'm sure that he would share it up as well. And the second one was about guaranteeing that information is not shared with, for example, ICE. So the city for a long time had a sanctuary cities policy that only impacted the police. We broadened that to all city departments. So nobody should be sharing information with undocumented residents that is a city staff, period. And that includes people in the New Haven Public Schools. It includes other departments as well. That is an order by the city, by myself. That's an order that I have implemented in the city. And the first question is the most complicated. You asked about the crisis response team. And the reason that we are starting a 6-month process to basically make some of the decisions that you outlined. We receive over 100,000 911 calls a year. And our initial estimate is that potentially around 10,000 of those calls could not need a police response, but could have potentially the crisis response team responding instead. And the crisis response team, our model is roughly at this point based off the CAHOOTS model in Oregon, where 2 individuals in their own, in like a city vehicle would go out to a site and have been dispatched by the 911 operator to a call that has been assessed by the 911 operator as not needing police response. That could be someone calling and saying, oh, there's, someone shouting on the street corner, or someone that may be experiencing homelessness and just someone calls it in, those types of situations. And the individuals that respond right now, we're looking at someone that is a social worker, and then someone that is a peer with lived experience, because we've looked at initially some different models and think that might be the most successful at helping someone, addressing an issue, de-escalating it rather than potentially escalating. It also allows the police to focus on what their core mission is, which is reducing crime and keeping people safe. The trick, as you highlighted, is making sure that the standard operating procedures ensure that people are safe, right? And that's the people that are receiving the response, but that's also the crisis response team itself. And so what we want to do is, and what we plan on doing, is having a lot more people engaged in that conversation. We're doing focus groups with people that may potentially receive a response, but then we're also working with our 911 PSAP center and police and fire to make sure that that we're appropriately dispatching people and coming up with the right standard operating procedures to keep people safe. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else? Open floor. Answers. You are on mute.
Answers? You have a question?
Yep,
There you go.
A few thoughts to share with you, mostly related to building and environmental issues. I'm very, very glad to see the progress being done on new zoning for accessory dwelling units. It's one of the best ways of opening up the housing market and providing good quality, low cost housing. I do have a concern about the size of units and basement units. And something that I think would be useful would be to have the health department look at the standards, particularly for the basement units, in terms of ventilation when they're going to be next to furnaces, things like that, methods of egress, and the amount of light. Basement units can be so different from each other. There's some on a slope that might have a full-size window at one end. But we know that there's abusive property owners that would put people in a place with no light and with old oil burners and things like that. So I think that something more is needed on that score. And I think that it's maybe moving a little too fast because for instance, there's never been a discussion, which usually happens with a major zoning change of city plan staff coming to the management teams for a discussion. So I think that it's absolutely the right direction and something I've advocated for years, but I think a little more caution, particularly about health and safety issues, needs to be looked at. And then I am still, of course, concerned about the state agreement that was made on the Union Station. The expanded parking in an area that is already highly polluted and where lots of low-income people live now, and that more will live there when the Church Street South area is built, that we're really behind the times. Like 30 years behind the times still in the thinking about what you do about parking policy in a major transportation hub. And, I continue my strong opposition to that, and we'll continue working on that. I'd like to see it better coordinated with what happens on Church Street South. So that and the parking being pushed into the Dwight neighborhood, again, a deep and profound environmental justice issue. Um, the city really needs to work on this better. And I know that neighbors in that neighborhood are still trying to get that part of the plan to change. And it's a little like the pilot issue and getting more money from Yale. This is a regional issue, and it's being pushed on a very small, low-income, minority neighborhood. And then I'll just offer one comment related to Tony's question about Yale. I've always thought it's interesting to think about pilot, that it's money from every taxpayer in the whole state of Connecticut that funds the pilot pool, payment in lieu of taxes, that goes to colleges and that goes to towns hosting major nonprofit institutions. And what's interesting about that is that in a certain way, it means that even a private institution like Yale or Albertus are essentially publicly supported institutions. Every taxpayer, low income or not, that pays taxes is actually allowing Yale to not pay its fair share. And, all of us are very interested in the issues of fairness and equity and the city having what's necessary to function properly. But I think it's worth thinking of this as a framework, that Yale is a publicly supported institution, and what does it owe back? So just a thought to share with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrews. Appreciate your comments on Yale. Just two things. So the accessory dwelling units that Answers is referring to, we are submitting to the Board of Alders an ordinance amendment that would allow the phase one of this would allow homeowners who have, say, an attic or a basement, as Answers referred to, that they want to refinish, approved by the building department. So, there would be safe living conditions. And it's at this point for homeowners only. They would allow them to refinish those and create another unit. So for example, for a relative that might want to live there, or they could rent it out to someone else. And this, in my view, is good policy because you're increasing density incrementally. You're allowing someone to potentially either have a relative, oftentimes it's a retired parent, that will stay with them, or collected some additional revenue. And it's done in a way that it doesn't have a dramatic impact on the change in the neighborhood. It's a way to provide more affordable options as well for housing. This answers, I think, to your point on this of making sure that they're safe is an inspection issue, and both through the building department and LCI. And I just want to flag for people, one of the things that we're working on is digitizing the record and inspection keeping with LCI, both internally so that we can look at the different inspections that are going on and the number of inspections, and then externally as well. So people will be able to look up a property and say, this property was inspected on this date and that date, and they failed. They had rodent issues, and so it's a way to put more pressure on landlords and hold them more accountable. On Union Station, yes, there's more parking, but the state's proposal and our proposal, we dramatically decreased the amount of parking. The proposal includes a bus transit center that will promote more easy access to public transportation. It includes what we call a liner building that will cover up the parking garage and include additional retail. It also allows us to extend the lease of the Union Station, which the state owns, to ensure that the parking authority for a much longer period of time in the city play a role in Union Station. No one's going to be fully happy with the agreement, but the number of parking spaces is dramatically reduced from what the state initially wanted. And I think that we got so many benefits to the community that is a very good deal. You and I might land on different places, but I feel quite strongly that we got a good deal as someone that bikes around the city.
I'd like to just go back to the ADU unit and inspection. I think that there needs to be something prior to inspection, for instance, standards about, for instance, what kind of ventilation system is put in if a unit is next to oil and gas burners. But also I think that something zoning can do is, for instance, let's say if the unit is 600 or 700 square feet, you could create a standard that there needs to be a certain square footage of windows per square footage of living space. That would be a zoning issue. And it would make it easier to make sure that there's basic livability and it doesn't turn into something that a less than healthy environment is created that an inspector, in fact, could do nothing about because it conforms with zoning. So I think that that would be a type of thing that could be put into the zoning ordinance. And again, I think we have great leadership in the health department, and it could be good to bring them into taking a look at this issue.
Thanks, Angeles.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else? It's 8 o'clock on this beautiful Tuesday. Sun hasn't set entirely yet. Last takers, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Good to see you all. Have a good night.
Good night, folks.
All right,
Good night.
we'll send the email out with the minutes in it. At the top of that email is going to be a link to sign up for the newsletter if you haven't gotten it, because I know that there's been some confusion around that. We're going to put it on Facebook as well. And then I think one of the things to look for between this meeting and the next one is a poll coming out about when people would be comfortable meeting in person again. I think there'd be a period of, my proposal is a period of hybrid while we're in person and we are also Zooming it. And then at some point bringing us all actually into the same room. So looking forward to that. And until next time, email us or see us on the streets. We're out there.
Bye-bye.